There are superheroes who can fly, superheroes who can lift buildings, superheroes who can survive bullets, bend reality, or stare down gods. And then there is the Flash, a man whose power almost seems laughable. He runs fast. But once you actually dig into the character, speed stops being the interesting part. The Flash is not really about a character about running. He is a character about time, about regret, grief, about the temptation to go back and fix what cannot be fixed. And most importantly, about learning that just because you are fast enough to outrun almost anything does not mean you should. Across more than 80 years of comics, animated series, deaths, resurrections, alternate timelines, and cosmic crisis, the Flash has become one of DC's most important characters. Not because of what he can do, but because whenever DC's universe needs to change, the Flash is somewhere near the center of it. He has died to save reality. He has returned from the dead. He has rewritten history. He has accidentally created new universes. And through all of it, the same question keeps following him. If you could run back into your past, would you change it? And if you did, could you live with what happened next? This is the story of the Flash. To understand Barry Allen, we need to begin with someone else, Jay Garrick. Jay debuted in Flash comic number 1 in 1940, the golden age of comics. His origin was wonderfully simple. He was a college student who accidentally inhaled heavy water vapors during a lab experiment, survived, and woke up fast. He wore a red shirt, blue pants, and most famously, a winged metal helmet inspired by the Roman god Mercury. Jay became the Flash, fought criminals, and eventually helped found the Justice Society of America. But by the early 1950s, superhero comics had fallen out of fashion. Many characters disappeared, including the Flash. Then, in 1956, DC did something unusual. Instead of bringing Jay back, they reinvented the idea entirely. New costume, new origin, new identity. And in showcase number 4, Barry Allen was born. That issue was widely considered the starting gun of the Silver Age of superheroes. Barry Allen was a forensic police scientist, and that matters, because Barry is not merely someone who happens to have powers. He is analytical, methodical, curious. He wants to understand how things work. Ironically, Barry is also famously late, which sounds like an obvious joke for someone destined to become the fastest man alive. But there is something almost perfect about it. Before he becomes the Flash, time controls Barry. Afterward, he spends much of his life trying to control time. One evening, lightning strikes his lab. The bolt hits a cabinet full of chemicals. Those chemicals explode across him, and somehow, impossibly, he survives and discovers he can move at superhuman speed. He creates a costume and takes the name The Flash. And one of the more charming details is where that name comes from. Barry grew up reading comic books about Jay Garrick. To Barry, Jay was fictional, a childhood hero. So when he gains powers, he names himself after his favorite comic book character. That innocent idea would later become one of the most important concepts in DC history. In 1961, The Flash number 123 published a story called The Flash of Two Worlds. And this story changed superhero comics forever. Barry accidentally vibrates himself into another reality, and then he meets Jay Garrick, the original Flash, the superhero Barry thought existed only in comic books. DC used the story to explain how their Golden Age and Silver Age characters could both exist. Jay lived on Earth 2. Barry lived on Earth 1. The multiverse had entered mainstream superhero comics, and the Flash was standing right in the middle of it. That would become a defining theme. Whenever DC experimented with parallel universes, dimensional travel, or major continuity changes, the Flash tended to be involved. One of the Flash's greatest strengths is his rogues gallery. Batman may have the most famous villains. Spider-Man may have the most recognizable collection, but the Flash's villains are unique because they operate almost like a community. Captain Cold, Heatwave, Mirror Master, Weather Wizard, Trickster, Captain Boomerang, Pied Piper, and others. Most of them are not cosmic monsters, they are professionals, thieves with bizarre technology and very specific gimmicks. And unlike many villain teams, the rogues often follow rules. They generally dislike unnecessary killing. They sometimes protect one another. Their relationship with the Flash can almost resemble a twisted professional rivalry. Captain Cold, in particular, became much more than a simple villain. Leonard Snart is frequently portrayed as someone with a code. He steals, he commits crimes, he will fight the Flash, but there are lines even he will not cross. That gives Flash comics a tone that differs from most superhero stories. Central City is not Gotham, and Flash does not treat every opponent as irredeemable, but one enemy stands completely apart. If Barry Allen represents hope, Eobard Thawne represents obsession. Thawne comes from the future. In many versions of his origin, Barry Allen is not simply Thawne's favorite superhero. He is the defining figure of Thawne's entire life. Thawne studies him obsessively, eventually recreates the accident that gave Barry his powers. He becomes a speedster. But his admiration collapses when he discovers he is destined to become the Flash's greatest enemy. Admiration transforms into hatred, and Thawne becomes Professor Zoom, the Reverse Flash. He wears a costume that mirrors Barry's, yellow instead of red, an inversion of everything Barry stands for. But the thing that makes Reverse Flash truly terrifying is not his speed, it's his willingness to use time itself as a weapon. Most villains attack your present. Thawne attacks your entire life. He reaches backward through history, changing things, destroying relationships before they even begin, causing tragedies before Barry can prevent them. Over the years, DC gradually transformed him from one of Barry's enemies into something much more disturbing. He became the architect of Barry's trauma. Barry Allen's modern origin is significantly darker than his original Silver Age history. Barry now carries the memory of his mother being murdered when he was very young. His father, Henry Allen, was convicted of the crime. Barry believed he was innocent. That tragedy became one of the reasons he pursued forensic science. He wanted evidence, certainty, truth. If the justice system could wrongly destroy his father, Barry wanted to become someone who could find what everyone else missed. Eventually, Barry discovers something horrifying. His mother's death was not a random murder. Reverse Flash had traveled back through time and killed her. Thawne had inserted himself directly into Barry's childhood, not to change history into some grand scheme, but purely because he hated him. There is something horrifyingly personal about that motivation. Thawne cannot kill Barry without risking his own existence, so instead he makes him miserable. He reaches into his history and removes happiness, and suddenly Barry's entire relationship with time changes, because Barry possesses one ability almost no grieving person could ever be trusted with: the ability to go back. In 2011, storyline Flashpoint begins with something impossible. Barry wakes up. His mother is alive, but he has no powers, and the world is completely different. Bruce Wayne is dead. Thomas Wayne became Batman. Martha Wayne became the Joker. Superman was captured by the government and imprisoned rather than raised by the Kents. Wonder Woman and Aquaman are leading their nations into a catastrophic war that is killing millions. At first, Barry assumes Reverse Flash changed history, because of course he does. Except eventually Barry discovers the truth. Thawne did not create this world, Barry did. He had traveled back through time and stopped Reverse Flash from murdering Nora Allen. He saved his mother, one completely understandable act. One thing anyone would want to do. A reality shattered around it. This is one of the most important moments in Barry's history because his greatest mistake does not come from arrogance, it comes from love. It doesn't He doesn't rewrite history because he wants power, he just wants his mother back. So Barry runs back again, and he stops himself. He allows his mother to die. Imagine what that means. Barry Allen effectively chooses his mother's murder, not because he doesn't love her, but because he knows saving her will cost countless other lives. That is the Flash at his most powerful. Not when he outruns light, not when he breaks through dimensions, not when he has all the power necessary to get what he wants, but when he has all the power necessary to get what he wants and chooses not to use it. For an entire generation, one of the most beloved versions of the Flash came from the Justice League and Justice League Unlimited, my favorite favorite TV shows about the Justice League. That Flash is Wally West, and he is immediately distinct from many comic portrayals of Barry. Animated Wally is funny, immature, constantly talking, acting as comic relief. At first, he can seem like the least serious member of the League, but beneath the jokes is enormous compassion. In the episode Flash and Substance, Wally's enemies target him during the opening of a museum dedicated to him, and we see something important. Wally knows these people, not just their villain names, their actual lives. At one point, he encounters the trickster sitting in a bar. Instead of attacking, Wally simply talks to him, tells him he should take his medication, offers to visit him in the hospital. Trickster agrees to turn himself in. That most that moment captures something essential about the Flash. He is not always trying to defeat people. Sometimes he is trying to help them. And then in Divided We Fall, Wally runs so fast he begins merging with the Speed Force itself. He nearly disappears into it. The League desperately pulls him back. When Wally returns, he tells them he is never going that fast again. It gives the Speed Force an almost spiritual quality, not just energy, but somewhere a speedster can vanish into permanently. Over time, Flash mythology becomes less about one hero and more about inheritance. Jay Garrick, Barry Allen, Wally West, Bart Allen, Jesse Quick, Max Mercury, Wallace West, each generation inherits something, but they do not become identical. Jay is not Barry, Barry is not Wally, Wally is not Bart. That is what makes legacy characters compelling when handled well. A mantle survives because each person changes it. The Flash may be DC's greatest example of that. Barry inspired Wally. Wally inspired Bart. Jay became a grandfatherly figure connecting them all. And the concept of the Flash family eventually becomes literal. Wally and Linda Park marry and have children with super speed. The legacy is no longer just superhero tradition, it is a family history. The obvious question surrounding the Flash is always the same. If Barry can travel through time, why doesn't he just fix everything? Why not prevent every murder, every disaster, every tragedy? Flashpoint is the answer. Because history is interconnected. Change one event, and the consequences spread. Save one person, and someone else might never be born. Prevent one disaster, and another might occur. And the larger lesson is something superheroes rarely have to face so directly. Power doesn't equal permission. Just because Barry can change history doesn't mean he has the moral right to rewrite everyone else's lives. That is an extraordinary burden, because Barry has to accept tragedy while knowing it may technically be preventable. Most people say, if only I could go back. Barry actually can, and still has to choose not to. At first glance, the Flash seems like one of the easiest superheroes to understand. Barry Allen was struck by lightning. Chemicals covered his body. He became incredibly fast. He put on a red costume and started fighting crime. But that is only the surface. The deeper you go into Flash mythology, the less the character becomes about speed. The Flash becomes about time, about memory, about family, about inheritance, about grief, about the consequences of love that goes too far. Barry Allen spends much of his life discovering that being able to reach the past doesn't mean he belongs there. Wally West spends much of his life learning that honoring Barry doesn't mean remaining beneath his shadow. Jay Garrick demonstrates that a hero can inspire generations long after his own era has passed. And the entire Family demonstrates that a heroic identity does not need to belong to one person forever. Maybe that is why the Flash has remained so important to DC. Whenever the universe collapses, whenever history changes, whenever a generation ends and another begins, somewhere, someone starts running. And through all the impossible speeds, collapsing timelines, and cosmic crisis, the Flash keeps returning to one idea. You cannot live your life running backward. You can remember the people you lost, you can honor them, you can carry them with you, but eventually you have to move forward. And maybe that is what it really means to be the fastest man alive. Not that you can outrun everyone else, but that no matter what happens behind you, you keep running toward what comes next.